Hello, everyone. Good morning, day, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you're joining us from. And welcome to this UNTOC side event on tackling illicit flows and use of ammunition. I'm Emilia Dungel from the Small Arms Survey, and I'll be your moderator today. A very important note before we start is that the participating organizations in this event, we all have commitments to not have single-sex panels. And we tried to get additional speakers that are women, but as this continues to be a male-dominated field, women experts are high in demand. But we are working on it, and we promise to do better in the future. So finally, we look forward to sharing this discussion with you, and thank you so much for coming. We're here today to talk about the illicit flows and use of ammunition, current challenges, new approaches, and practical solutions. So compared to small arms, ammunition remains understudied. And from a law enforcement angle, the focus is often more on ballistics and using seized ammunition as a way to solve crimes. But in today's event, we're going to look at it from a broader approach. Our presenters are Leonardo Lara from the Global Firearms Program at the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, Manuel Martinez from the Conventional Arms Program at the UN Institute for Disarmament Research, Nicolas Floquin from the Small Arms Survey, and finally, Miguel Bernard from the Institute of Forensic Science and Legal Medicine in Jamaica. So I think, again, we're short on time, so we're just going to get going. We'll start with a global overview to situate the discussion. So we'll first turn to Leonardo Lara from UNODC. The screen is yours.
Thanks a lot, Emilia. I'll start just by thanking the organizers, UNIDIR and the Small Arms Survey. It's always a pleasure to work with you guys. I always think that you guys have your thinking caps on, and it's, the work that you do in terms of research and the things that you find out are very interesting, and, they take us towards action and new ideas, and that's always welcome. As Emilia said, I'll go into, I'm trying to share my screen. I hope you see it. Can you confirm that you see it?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Good. I just wanted to give a general overview on the issue of ammunition and on the information that we have at the global level on ammunition in general. Okay. Just a very small word on the Global Firearms Program. We are the part of UNODC that focuses specifically on firearms trafficking, but also its parts and components and ammunition, of course, with a mandate to help in the implementation of the firearms protocol, but also of other instruments on arms control. When we look at the issue of ammunition, I think we're all aware of the big problem and the impact of firearms trafficking and its illicit use. There's over 460,000 homicides per year, roughly, according to UNODC data which comes from member states. And of these, approximately more than 50% is carried out with firearms. So it already, it shows the importance of looking at the issue and the impact of the issue of trafficking of firearms. And, linked to it, of course, it's ammunition, because, otherwise, without it, the firearm is pretty much useless. Another point that I wanted to bring up, it's linked to and it's something that is particularly close to the mandate of UNODC, and it's the message, to pass on the message that crime kills more people than armed conflict. And we always make a point of saying this because, when we talk about the proliferation of firearms or small arms and light weapons, or weapons in general, people tend to think of conflict zones, war zones, etc. But if you look at the actual data, you will find out that crime kills more. In this slide, you see this is an aggregated deaths for over 27 years, and you see the proportions are quite high. If you look at the data from 2017, then you'll find that among these deaths in this year, 80%, over 460,000, were victims of homicide, 15% were people killed in armed conflict, and 5% victims of terrorist violence. So we always like to mention this just to keep that perspective of the importance and the relevance of taking a look, when we talk about firearms issue, of taking a look also at crime. This is a pretty slide from our colleagues from the Small Arms Survey showing the financial value of small arms exports between 2014 and 2016. Why do I show this? Because again, of course, there was a big trade of illicit, legal trade of firearms. But if you look closely at the figures, you will find that roughly 40% of this figure, which is again a very important number, is ammunition. And this goes back to what I was saying. The firearm alone doesn't do much, but you need the ammunition, and normally ammunition gets forgotten and it's not that often thought about. UNODC conducted research for the last couple of years, and we recently launched in July of this year the Global Study on Firearms Trafficking 2020, collecting data from more than 100 of our member states. Why do I mention these? Because if you look, one of the key pieces of information that we wanted to get was the number of seized firearms, so that that makes us understand a little bit better trafficking flows in general. It's a complex methodology that has many questions and many elements. In this study, we got responses for our questionnaire from 80 countries. And then we use supplementary information from our colleagues from the UN Office for Disarmament Affairs, data from the World Customs Organization, and also other national sources. The point that I want to make with this is that, the more detailed information you start asking countries, the less details you have, because the less details they keep. And this is actually the case with ammunition. So of these 80 countries that actually replied to our questionnaire, only 72 countries actually had data on seized weapons, which was like the main number to get to, or one of the main numbers to get to. But once we go down and trying to get more towards the details of what we need, we have less responses. So for example, we only got responses on ammunition from 47 countries, and of these 47, only 30 countries provided data that was good enough so that we could actually use. So again, we have, the United Nations, we have 193 member states. We only were able to get information on seizure of ammunition of 30 states, and the reasons for this, there are many reasons. One of the main reasons is that a lot of countries don't keep track of this or don't keep systematic track of this. There were over 500,000 weapons seized, firearms seized in 2016 and in 2017. And when we look at ammunition, according to the data that we have, the figure for 2016 is 3 million rounds, and the figure for 2017 is roughly 8 million rounds, which I would argue it's a very small figure, compared to the figure from small arms. And again, this is linked to the fact of the very poor data that there is at the moment, or the lack of capacities to exploit this data. Another big point that I wanted to make is that usually when there are seizures of firearms, they don't come alone. There's also they are seized often with ammunition. When this is done at the customs level, more than 50% of seizures involve also ammunition. Again, pointing towards the importance of this issue. This is not my best PowerPoint slide ever, but I just wanted to give you just so that you can see the list of countries that provided data on ammunition, and then you see that the figures are also very different. So, for example, we have a big country like Brazil in 2017 reporting 170,000 rounds of ammunition seized, and then a much smaller country like Peru reporting 145,000. So again, it's just, I just mentioned this so that we take this information with a pinch of salt, because there's a big gap in information. Why do we collect this data? We collect this data not for the sake of it, or not just for the sake of having this information available to us. but just so that it can convert it into action so that we can do something with this data. And I will not go more into this. I will leave my colleagues to exploit this more, but this is very important to us. And the only way that we can get this information is that if countries actually see that this is important for them, that they can make use of data and that they can exploit this data. With that, I finish because of time constraints. Otherwise, I'm more than happy to talk about for a very long time about this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leonardo. That was a very useful scene-setting presentation. It's interesting that even though you talked about the gaps of data, what you have there still seems to show very interesting information. But so if we try to delve in a bit deeper and learn more about the ways to understand the dynamics of this data, even though I recognize that you said there's gaps in it, we will turn to Manuel Martinez from UNIDIR, who will talk more about why we focus on ammunition and techniques we can employ to do so. Manu, the screen is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Emilia, for your kind introduction. And I'm honored to be with all of you today. I'm going to share my screen as well, so bear with me just a second. I'm hoping that you're seeing it now. Sure. I hope you're seeing the presentation. Is that correct?
Yeah.
All right. Perfect. So for those who don't know, UNIDIR is an autonomous institute within the UN, and we are a think tank focusing on international disarmament and security. Our goal is to assist the international community to develop practical and innovative ideas and solutions to critical security problems, such as the threat that brings us today, which is posed by the illicit ammunition proliferation. Now, we are based in Geneva, but as you can see in this slide, most of our work at the Conventional Arms Program is applied research. We deploy to understand the challenges in places where crime, conflict, and violence is prevalent. But also, we try to understand how weapons and ammunition contribute to peace and security. Now, an important question to answer today is why ammunition? And our research shows that when ammunition is not well regulated, it becomes an accelerator of violence. And that happens in conflict, in post-conflict, in crime, in battlefields, in communities, at home. We need to reduce its effect in the lives of people. And at this moment, I would like to pause here and take a second to look at this picture and ask, what do you see? I see information. I see that when you look at the Headstamp markings, they can provide a source of data that could be useful in the fight against crime. For example, in the top right corner, we can tell from the markings, sorry, I think I moved this. We can tell from the markings that that is a shotgun cartridge imported by the Dominican Republic to an armory or an importer coded as B in a lot that was identified as A. In this slide, I also see opportunity. I see opportunity for states to improving their marking requirements so they could produce a deterrent effect on diversion, but also improve crime investigations. And I also see opportunity for industry innovation, for integrating new technologies into production practices, as we can see in the bottom left corner, with the integration of laser marking techniques. I also see that aggregated data on ammunition could be an additional and maybe untapped source of information to inform the fight against crime. We know that in crime, every bullet tells a story, and forensic ballistic experts in the room today would agree on that. And at UNIDIR, we also think that ammunition tells a story. But we believe that that story is more powerful when we can piece all the cartridges together and map their impact on the streets. Now, why we think it is important to focus research, policies, and strategies on ammunition to reduce crime? First, because ammunition is replenishable. ammunition is a consumable good or a consumable item that must be replenished once it is used by criminals. Second, because when affected states are able to disrupt the illicit supply, they have an immediate impact reducing crime. And third, because illicit ammunition proliferation remains understudied. It is hidden in the shadows. We don't really know. And we need better and more granular data and exploit that data, as Leonardo was saying, to be more effective in policies and practices. Now, what are we doing about it at UNIDIR? To generate more data on ammunition, we are developing an ammunition profiling tool in the form of a handbook. Or in other words, it is a step-by-step guide that can be used voluntarily to create a profile of illicit ammunition in circulation and misuse in a certain setting. It could be a city, a country, or a certain region. The way that it is designed is an easy-to-use tool that standardizes data collection and does not need complex technology or systems. Only eyes, hands, brains, and a spreadsheet. And our hope with this effort is that this handbook strengthens local capacities and contributes to the generation of new data on ammunition, because data is clearly missing. But just to be clear, we consider ammunition profiling, and I think it is important to stop here a second on the concept itself. We consider ammunition profiling as the compilation and analysis of aggregated data, documenting at a minimum calibers, markings, manufacturers, and years of manufacture from the ammunition recovered in crime scenes and seizures. And an important consideration to make is that profiling is not tracing. Tracing identifies the exact origin and the exact diversion point, recreating the supply chain. But on the other hand, ammunition profiling, even though it is not tracing, it generates a baseline of information, and it might not answer all questions, but will allow analysts to ask the right ones. So how does the handbook that we are working on look in practice? The handbook is designed to produce 4 databases. Database 1 will aggregate data extracted from ammunition collected as evidence from crime scenes, domestic operations, and entry-exit ports. Database 2 will gather records of imports on ammunition manufactured and stocked in the country. And the relation between these 2 databases might be important to start painting some of the dynamics behind trafficking and illicit use. Databases 3 and 4 are different in nature because they try to bring context information into the profile database. The database 3 focuses on illicit manufacture, and database 4 uses interviews to capture the story behind the statistics. Now, allow me to then summarize my 4 key messages. First, ammunition is understudied, and we need more granular data, the exploitation of more granular data. Second, understanding ammunition flows has a potential to produce an immediate impact in crime reduction. That's why focusing on ammunition is important. And third, creating ammunition profiles could inform downstream and upstream policy prescriptions. It could benefit the local level, but also multilateral processes like the one with the transnational organized crime and the firearms protocol. And lastly and fourth, the UNIDIR handbook will be available in December, and we are expecting to conduct case studies in 2021 in different urban environments across regions. So please feel free to use it. Our desire is to distribute the methodology as widely as possible and aim for a multiplier effect. So thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer your question later. Back to you, Emilio.
Thank you so much, Manu. It was very useful to have you unpack a bit more about why we as a community look at ammunition and also elaborating some of your research approaches. I think we're all super excited about UNIDIR's ammunition profiling handbook, and it looks like it's going to be a very useful resource for practitioners as well as policymakers. So yeah, we're excited about it coming up. So then continuing on investigative means and exploring new avenues for data collection on ammunition, we're going to hear from my small arms survey colleague, Nicolas Florcan. And Nick, the screen is yours.
Thanks very much, Emilia, and thanks for the participants for joining us today, and to UNIDIR and UNODC and our friends from Jamaica as well to have made the effort to join this discussion and provide some very important insights. Let me just figure out the screen sharing for a second. Please bear with me. I'm almost there. There you go. So I want to introduce the small survey. I think you know us. I'll just say that I think we're quite known for our work in developing and post-conflict settings. But since 2015 in particular, we've also undertaken a number of studies in the European context, especially looking at trafficking dynamics since and before the wave of terrorist attacks that involve firearms in the region. And so as part of that work, we engaged a lot with forensic institutions and ballistics experts because they actually hold a lot of the data at the national level that provides key insights into firearms. And as part of that work, we did become more acquainted with ballistics data sets, which are quite sophisticated tools that law enforcement agencies use to basically analyze ammunition found at crime scenes or recovered. And what I want to talk about today is basically how this information that is used by law enforcement to solve crimes is actually also helpful in a broader perspective to undertake the kind of profiling and analysis that my colleagues have just mentioned. The first way that these systems are very helpful is because they include information not only on seized firearms, so the weapons that are actually found at crime scenes, but also on the weapons that are missing. So when the forensic specialist finds a cartridge at the crime scene, but the weapon is missing, well, they will still enter the ammunition. And this will include information on the caliber, but also they will be able to make some analysis and deduct what type of weapon and sometimes what even model of firearm was used to fire it, because each firearm will leave very unique marks on the spent ammunition. And why is this important? Well, because we see in some cases that when you look at the full spectrum of firearms in these data sets, so including the missing firearms, you actually have a slightly different picture than when you look only at the retrieved firearms. So here you have on the screen one example, which is looking at France and the cases that were entered in the national ballistic system in 2016. Where you see that when you look at the full data set, so including the missing weapons, you have 7.62 by 39 millimeter ammunition in the top 5, whereas it's not there when you look only at the retrieved firearms. So this is important. Why? Because that's a very different type of weapon. This is potentially used by Kalashnikov, automatic types of rifles. And so it's different capabilities, but it's also different policy implications, possibly different sources for these types of firearms. So basically, by looking at these ballistics data sets, we have the potential to look at a broader set of firearms being illicitly used or trafficked. The other very interesting aspects with these data sets is that they include very high quality images of ammunition retrieved at crime scenes. And basically, they do 3D scans of ammunition cartridges, from all angles, including the headstamp. And as Manuel has mentioned, the headstamp is a key feature for profiling ammunition, because it includes markings that provide information on manufacturer, year of production, and other information. And so this year we've been working on a study with 4 European laboratories who provided us with access to information, and also with 2 partners that have licenses with some of the main ballistic systems, to explore a little bit what we could learn from the Headstamp information in these countries' ballistics data sets. Obviously, this was done through very strict protocols when we had access to non-confidential information. So the headstamp photos, the markings, the caliber, the type of crime, and the year of the incident. We were able to compile a data set of more than 3,100 cartridges that were observed since 2015 by these 4 laboratories. I can't go yet into the details of the findings on flows per country and these sorts of things, because we're still reviewing and analyzing the data in consultation with our partners. However, I can make a few observations that I think are probably helpful for this audience. First, that there are some potential biases with respect to the types of ammunition that are put into these data sets. And this is because when, for example, at a crime scene, let's say 20 pieces of ammunition are collected, well, it was established that they all came from the same firearm. Well, in some countries, only 2 or 3 of these specimens will be entered into the data set because they only need a few specimens to really establish what traces the weapon has left. And so there's a potential bias in the sense that the examiners might select only the cartridges that have the clearest marks left on them. And this may lead to a selection of harder metals, for example, in certain types of ammunition. We don't think it's a huge problem, but obviously it's a bias to be noted, and also that can be resolved if the protocols were to be changed. Another observation is that the data set really focuses on violent crimes. So assaults and homicides represented more than 60% of the data set. So we're really talking about a focus really on violent crimes. The other types of crime were acts against property, a few drug-related crimes, but also violations of the firearms legislation. The main calibers, so we're in the European context, it was handgun calibers, so 9mm Luger, 7.65 Browning, but also some blank ammunition, which is very interesting for us because we've done a lot of work on converted firearms. And we saw that amongst these blank cartridges that were retrieved at crime scenes, we could see from the information we had that some of them had been tampered to be able to project a projectile. One key difference with conflict areas is that the majority of the cartridges don't have a year of production, which is quite typical with handgun ammunition. So we didn't have a year of production for 72% of the cases. So that is evidently a piece of information that's very useful in conflict areas for understanding when it was produced and how long it took for it to be diverted into possibly illicit use. Here, the information is more scarcely available. However, when there is that information, so in 28% of the cases, the age is quite old, so 33 years old. That's also consistent. That's actually consistent with what we find in conflict areas. And also, we did find some very short, so it's not exactly time to crime, it's manufacture to use, I guess. But in 27 cases, the year of production and the year of the incident was the same. So that's also potentially of interest for looking at very immediate sources of ammunition used in criminal cases. So to summarize, I think we see these data sets as a really untapped source of information for researchers and policymakers who try to understand how ammunition is used, how it flows into, and how it's diverted into the illicit field. And so I think there's different ways. We'll hear from the Jamaican colleague about how Jamaica goes about systematizing this information at their level. From our experience here, we see that there's very sophisticated systems that are used in a number of countries in Europe, but also in some developed countries, these ballistics data sets, and that we think that there's probably some relatively easy technological solutions, to recording that information more systematically that would really allow us to get a better picture of these ammunition flows in those countries. And it's actually a little bit interesting, I think, that currently we know more about these headstamps circulating in conflict zones than in a number of developing countries. So I hope this is useful, and back to you, Emilia.
Thanks, Nick. That is interesting and useful, and in terms of trying to conceptualize the broader use of ballistic data that's beyond their primary purpose of solving crimes and using this to identify trends and patterns of illicit ammunition, it sounds very promising. And indeed, it would be interesting to see how much more you could derive from such data if some of these identification tools were more systematized into ballistics procedures. So, as you noted, let's now turn to an intervention from Miguel Bernard from the Institute of Forensic Science and Legal Medicine in Jamaica to learn about their practices of already collecting headstamp information in their database. This presentation was pre-recorded, and we will give Miguel the screen now.
Good day. My name is Miguel Bernard, and I'm the Director of Firearm and Toolmark Examination at the Institute of Forensic Science and Legal Medicine here in Jamaica. Let me first begin by saying that it is indeed a pleasure to be able to share our experiences and to participate in this conference virtually, despite being unable to be there physically. My intention today is to briefly explain why we capture headstamp information in our database, how it supplements our IBIS data, and how we use it as intelligence on ammunition flows in Jamaica. Additionally, I will highlight the challenges and what further work we intend to embark on in this area. Now, my department receives every single unexpended cartridge or expended cartridge case that is recovered by law enforcement in Jamaica for the purposes of conducting forensic examinations. Our processes are so streamlined that during the examination of the ammunition or their components, we document not just the caliber and amount received, but also the details of the headstamp on every cartridge or cartridge case. The information is subsequently uploaded to our case management system, which stores information on all cases submitted to the department. The database is structured so that we can capture the amount, caliber, location recovered for each headstamp associated with ammunition and cartridge cases submitted to the department. This allows us to examine the data to identify trends such as whether there is an increase in a particular brand of ammunition in the country, or if there is an introduction of a brand new ammunition, or if there are different types of ammunition that are more concentrated in specific areas. Looking at all of these trends is geared towards establishing potential suppliers, sources of diversion, or illicit importation. We have now started to correlate our ballistics links data with the headstamp information to determine, for example, if certain active firearms utilize one brand of ammunition more frequently than others. This association with ammunition to specific firearms has the potential to identify ammunition that are more frequently used by specific individuals or gangs. This will give us the opportunity to not only identify sources of ammunition, but also to develop an open case file category that we can use to identify links between crime scenes that may not have been established solely through forensic ballistics examinations or firearms identification. Therefore, by capturing the headstamp information, we can supplement the ballistics link data that IBIS allows us to generate and enhance the type of intelligence about firearm-related crime that my department is able to generate. For us, the process of capturing this data is fairly simple, as it does not cause any undue burden on the staff, because it is not seen as additional work based on how it is already integrated in our processes. The most challenging aspect of using this information to monitor illicit ammunition flows and diversion is on the side of analyzing the data. This is so as we currently don't have all the desired dedicated human resources and some systems in place to constantly analyze, extract, and disseminate the information, especially considering that the possibilities are endless. Considering that we are pioneers in capturing and assessing this type of data for the stated purposes, it is our hope that we can become more efficient at analyzing this data to help prevent illicit manufacture, importation, as well as diversion of ammunition. In closing, I hope my intervention today added some value to the very important discussions that you, my esteemed colleagues, are having today. And I look forward to further interaction and sharing of ideas with you in the future. Thank you all for listening. Stay safe. God bless.
Great. Thank you, Miguel. I think your intervention made an excellent example of the feasibility to apply systematized approaches in practice. And in particular, I note that since you've integrated the capturing of data so efficiently, the most challenging aspect for you and your colleagues to use this information is on the analysis side, which I think is a really useful lesson to take away from this. But I think for now we will close so that we keep our time. And so we just want to thank you all for coming. And we want to thank our presenters, Leonardo Lara from UNODC, Manuel Martinez from UNIDIR, Nicolas Floquin from Small Arms Survey, Miguel Bernard from Jamaica. I also want to thank Lionel Kosirnik from the Small Arms Survey, who's doing the sort of back-end tech support. And again, to the attendees for coming. This has been a joint Small Arms Survey UNIDIR event. Thank you so much. Stay safe and take care of yourselves.